It says it's preparing, setting up. I bet it's going because sometimes.
Yeah, I just got the alert. Great. Excellent. So we are live. Thanks everyone for joining this week's OpenJS Foundation Cross-Project Council meeting. Today is November 19th, 2019. The issue for the agenda and whatnot is 408 in the cross-project council repo. Again, I'll remind folks to add their names to the list present in the Google Doc. And we have a pretty decent sized agenda here, including a couple of issues from the project onboarding repo. But first, I will ask if there are any announcements or any news from the board or elsewhere.
The board meeting is this Friday, so if there's any topics or issues that people want me to bring up or Chris to bring up, let us know. I don't think there's anything on the board as of now.
There may be some onboarding things. I don't know if Jory stopped me if this has already been confirmed, but stuff about disclaimers for funding and exactly when and where that is or isn't required. And I think that was one thing the board wanted to weigh in on.
Yeah, I do have one update from Brian. He's not going to be able to make it today, but he wanted to let everybody know that those conversations should be wrapping up with the board meeting on Friday. They should be affirming the votes that have been ongoing on that language. So we should be able to share that language on Friday.
Right. Now, does that cover, will those cover what was just mentioned, or is there another issue with details on what we'd want to bring up?
It should cover at least a big aspect of the no, you said what was just mentioned and I was hearing the funding piece. So as I understand it, there will be some direction coming from the board on Friday about that as well.
Cool. Hopefully it won't involve a very extreme amount of like disclaimers scattered everywhere.
No.
Good, thank you.
Great. And I think there's this is probably on your radar, Michael and Chris, but the ComCom charter update, I think the issue says there's an FYI sent out, hoping that Friday we can get that resolved.
Yeah, that one's tracked in the admin board in the Node project. I did send out an FYI. I'm not necessarily expecting like responses saying yes or no, but I think by Friday, if I don't hear any concerns, we can assume that it's just up to the CPC to approve.
Okay. Great. All right, so we will get into the agenda then. The first item on the agenda is pull request 407. This is changes to the code of conduct handling coming from the AMP project, going through things and making suggestions and changes and such. There are a number of approvals here. I think Toby may have a comment that he could resolve, but I think generally there's some consensus around this, and I believe it needs to land before we move COC handling proposal to stage 3. Does anybody have any more they want to add to this or anything they want to discuss?
Well, I think that PR 407, yeah, we need to land that, and then we can rebase the one that says to move to stage 3. That one I can't remember the requirements. There are already a few reviews, and I'm just wondering in terms of our requirements for landing a PR to a proposal in flight, if we're ready to land it.
Just as a comment on that, I had not looked at this earlier, slight concern. If we're talking about merging this right away, there's a reference in the code of conduct section there to refer to the code of conduct for the full text and reporting and escalation procedures. And that's a link to our own code of conduct document, which does not include the full text.
Okay, sorry, say this, which, this is part of the things being added or part of the things?
It's being added, the level 2 heading code of conduct under that one paragraph there.
Okay.
I'll add a comment to the
Yeah, if you can add a
right away,
comment.
but yeah, just mentioning this now because it sounded like we might be landing this right away, and
Right.
I want to make sure that I have a
Okay.
concern.
So we'll wait for you to comment on that. I assume that's just a fix up though, or is it something that needs discussion?
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. Barring that, I'm just wondering if we're close enough for this to be landed. It was open 6 days ago. I don't think this is really governance until it's moved to stage 3. So I don't know if any of the other sort of timelines apply or not. What do people think?
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people are happy enough, I'll wait for Toby's comment. Once we've addressed that, we'll go ahead and land, rebase the other one, which will then, does change the governance, so it'll have a longer review period and we could make any more changes there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes, and I believe that was Emily raising those questions about the links.
Yep.
Great. All right, great. So let's see. Well, I guess I'll stick to the agenda here. So moving on to the next item in the agenda is pull request 406, which adds missing links for bylaws and mission/vision statements. Jory opened this 6 days ago. We've got 3 approvals and I think 3 outstanding pending reviews from Miles, Brian, and Michael. Jory, do you want to give us any sort of context or update here?
Sure, and I did just before this meeting, Jordan, address your requested changes. So all this does is make some links work in the CPC charter. We have a charter document that references bylaws and a foundation mission and vision statement, which needs to be certainly made more crisp. But this is a document that we point people to who are building their applications for joining the foundation. And then we say, go make sure that your application kind of adheres to these goals and this vision, and then those links 404. So this just adds and so but it is technically a change to the charter because I edited the charter document, so it wasn't entirely clear to me if this needed to this kind of change needed to what kind of process this needed to go through.
We did land something related to typos, which I'm trying to find. I don't know if everybody remembers where that is.
Yeah,
there was something about errata, right? Like just that sort of, yeah.
Special exceptions made for pull requests seeking to make any of the following changes to this project. Errata fixes, editorial changes, meetings. Charter changes cannot be fast tracked.
There we go.
So, okay.
Right.
So basically, since it's in the charter itself, we'll need to, it's in the charter. Yeah, okay.
Must be approved by the board as well.
Yep.
Do you want to put that on your agenda for Friday?
Yeah,
well,
I'll send.
Michael?
Once the meeting's done, I'll try and remember to send out an email just to start a vote through email now. And
Okay.
if we don't close before the meeting, then hopefully get it addressed there. I
Thank
assume as like we have enough consensus here. We've got we have 4 approvals and it's a typo fix, guys. So I think that's fine with me. It sounds like we've got a consensus to move it forward.
Yeah, I'd encourage everyone on the call too to just jump in there and throw your approval on it. Just a couple of links. This is pull request 406.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, I'll try right after to send off that, see if we can push it forward.
All right, great, thank you. Excellent. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is pull request 405. And this is adds proposal for charter submission and review per issue number 200. We've got a couple of approvals. Mateo's got a couple of questions, but I don't think that either of them are really blocking. Jory, this is your PR. Do you want to give us some more context?
Sure. So the objective here is to make the process more clear for incubating projects, those that are going through the onboarding process, what the process will look like for the CPC to review their charters. So if you take a look at the project progression document, what you'll see is, we have all of these fairly detailed steps up to step 7. And then step 8 is we'll have a meeting and we'll approve your charter. And so that's not really specific enough for the kind of thing that we would like to do here. So it takes a stab at addressing what I think will be a very straightforward way of going about that, and providing some guidelines for what our CPC members will be looking at when they look at these charters. Remember, we're going to have 30 plus charters to be approving. So we want to make sure that we're doing that in a consistent way across all these projects, and that we're not bogging down the process with unnecessarily. So that's what this is about.
My only questions would be around the charters are approved when. Is that coming from anywhere else, or is that just the proposal?
That's just the proposal. So again, if you look at what we have written, we're really not clear on that. So if we want to, do something different, that's fine. This is the spaghetti on the wall,
right?
Because
I'm just thinking, like, without something written specifically, it would follow our normal consensus seeking process. I just, I'm wondering, like, the 50% of voting, and so forth, that side of things, is if we want to, like, is this a case where we need to do something different from the regular consensus seeking process?
My understanding of our charter was that the CPC needed to take some action to formally approve an incubated project.
Right. We already, actually, I looked in the governance, there's actually text that says when it's approved.
So if we wanted to do it, more in alignment with how we do the other kinds of consensus seeking decisions that we do here, that's a-okay too. It wasn't clear to me if this needed to be a thing that our voting members were active in.
Right. I'm just looking because, like, in our existing governance doc, we actually added a section called approving project charters. And so what it says is the request is approved when there are no outstanding objections, there are 2 or more approvals by voting CPC members, the board's been consulted in the case of substantial changes, the issue's been open for at least 14 days. So at very least, we need to make what's in these 2 docs consistent.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm in favor of whichever approach we feel ensures that eyes are on it, and also ensures that that these documents aren't unnecessarily blocked by procedure. So whichever, let's do that.
My preference is for what's already written in the charter. Like, it does require at least 2 weeks, so that gives people time to see it. But then it only requires 2 approvals. Says there are 2 or more approvals by voting CPC members. So, it's a potentially higher bar because it has to wait at least 14 days. but it reduces the actual approvals you need to be 2 voting CPC members. So I don't know which would result in faster approvals, but my guess might be this one.
Do you want to, because I agree with you that this language needs to match.
Yeah.
Do you want to add a comment on this PR, just pointing to that, and
Yep.
and I can update this to
Sure. Yeah, will do.
cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, great. And just kind of as a side note, I expect that I'm wondering if we should have a project board that tracks some of these things that we can make sure that we touch on in these weekly meetings as well, to make sure that things don't drop off, or you know, that we continue to raise awareness and move things forward. Anyway, moving on. The next item on the agenda is issue 400, and this, you know, I think I'm going to skip to the next one because I think it is more of an overarching issue. The next item is issue 398, which is onboarding meta questions. So let's go to that one first, and then we can double back. I assume this was born out of the meeting regarding onboarding. And Jory, you open this. I'm sorry to keep throwing the mic to you, but do you want to give us a little more context here?
Sure, and we did take this up briefly last week as well. So, you know, again, this was identified through onboarding activities and meetings with the team working to incubate AMP. So we took up the first question first last week on whether we want uniformity in the naming of certain files. And the group last week tended toward yes, wanting all files to kind of match what GitHub promotes as best practice. So that's sort of a piece that will need to be just added into our checklist as we're going through a new project to make sure that that uniformity exists, assuming we all still agree with that. Question one about onboarding highlighted actually, you know, a challenge with kind of some steps we took related to onboarding. We created a onboarding template issue, which is alive in this CPC repository, and that is the checklist where all of that stuff exists for incubation. Then we created a separate repo for onboarding, and we separated where these issues had been created and where this canonical information lived from the repository where we are now tracking that publicly. So it creates this situation where it's not clear where people should necessarily be posting questions or engaging with us on onboarding, whether that's here or whether that's in the new onboarding repository. And then further, whether if they're having specific questions about their own project's onboarding process, where those issues live. Is it on their repository? If there's actions that need to be taken on their repository, you know, or they need to take actions on our repository, how do we handle access management and that kind of thing? So that was the bucket of questions, but I think more specifically, or just I guess more concretely right now, we have onboarding questions, and where do we want to be sort of housing those and having conversations about those so we reduce the noise.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make that meeting. So I think this is really important work. My inclination is to just have all onboarding related stuff be in the onboarding repo, and have that repo really be an extension of the CPC, and make sure that we are, reviewing that repo and tagging things appropriately so they're on the agenda, and that we're continually staying on top of that. I would say with a project board, and I guess clarifying some other ways to manage this. And I would suggest that correspondingly we would move documents over there and point people to that repository. I'm looking at the issue templates as well, and there's a project onboarding checklist template. Again, my preference would be to move all this stuff over to one repo and just have it be the canonical place. Does anyone have thoughts?
When you mean everything, like, do you mean, because there's two types of things. I guess there's the stuff which is specific to onboarding a project, and then there's the general stuff. So for example, we just talked about how charters are approved for a project, and I guess as part of onboarding you're going to have to approve charters. So, in that concrete example, is that something you think we should move into the onboarding repo or leave in the CPC repo?
Personally, I would move it to the onboarding repo, but I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, and I don't want to get too hung up on process specifics.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like that one then gets complicated because some of that's in the governance as well. So I'd almost lean towards everything that's generic in the CPC repo, and then the specifics for onboarding particular projects go in the onboarding repo. But again, I think in the end we can work it out. But
yeah,
I really want to approach this from like a standpoint of what's going to be the best user experience for our onboarding projects, right? Like what makes the most sense to them, what helps them find the information they need fastest, and that kind of thing. And I think sometimes, especially on this particular piece, that should be the priority.
yeah, that's definitely a good point.
I agree.
So yeah, if we think from the perspective of having it all, like if we think it all being in one repo will make it easier for people being onboarded, then that seems like a good way to decide.
Yeah, I think if that were the default, and then if we found something that was like, oh, this should probably be in the CPC repo, then we can, take that on a case-by-case basis. But just having it be like clear to anyone approaching this that that's where we direct them, then it would be better for the user.
I also want to share, in case y'all didn't see this on I can't remember which issue, but we were able to create the private repository for applications in the silent period. So that is available to people who are members of this CPC regular team and the CPC voting team.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So should we capture what we think, using the one repository as the canonical place to have all issues and work happen unless specific things need to be moved around, and then also the required files, naming convention, comment on this issue and close this out?
Yeah, I think if somebody, Joe, like if you wanted to capture that verbally, we agree that uniformity is good here, and recap that would be great.
Yeah, I in the minutes I added there are no objections voiced to moving all onboarding related stuff to the onboarding repo.
Great. So I started a comment here. I'll come back to it and update it and then close it. I did skip over issue 400. I guess it's
Oops.
you know, it's a reference in the meta questions, but I guess it's a separate question altogether, which is a point of contact for onboarding, number 400, issue 400 here. Toby raises the question of how we have a clear point of contact during onboarding. Brian suggests assigning, and Toby raises the good question of triage permissions and whatnot. I don't think Toby or Brian are on the call here, but do we have
Shouldn't it
preferred
be
process around this?
Shouldn't it be the champion?
So Brian and Toby and I met last week and discussed this as well. And one of the things that we pointed out, or that was pointed out, is that it's very unclear what the role of the application manager and the champion are during the incubation process. Because Toby's read of this was that the champion's role was strictly for that silent period. And I shared that my understanding was the champion would be somebody who was with them throughout the incubation period. And so if that is everybody else's feeling as well, then perhaps that particular issue is resolved by making it more clear that the role of the champion is to stay with the project and be a point of contact for them throughout their incubation phase.
That's my understanding.
Mine as well.
I mean, depending on the question, it's probably good to send them to both the application manager and the champion, right?
Right. And so, if that's everybody's, understanding, and what this is just sort of like a weird hangnail left over from our earlier figuring this out together, then I think we could maybe resolve this issue with a PR clarifying that language. And I don't remember where the champion language lives, but I'm also happy to take that action item.
Oh, great. Thank you. And did you use the term weird hangnail?
I did. Yeah. Sorry.
All right, moving on. Great. Thank you. That's be good to have that clear. Excellent. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is an issue that I created around Collab Summit sessions. As I linked to in my most recent comments, I made a proposal around making use of the community corner and the Collab Summits to engage with the community around the cross-project council's work and the foundation overall. I'll just generally say I'm hoping to have like a short CPC overview at the community corner. I'm trying to arrange for like a CPC open office hours during the event right after the talk that Jory and I are giving, so that my hope is that we can, close our talk by saying, if you have more questions and whatnot, please come and see us. We're having an open office hours somewhere near the community corner and can engage the community further that way. And then I've also proposed a CPC Collab Summit session looking for around 3 hours, and there's some potential agenda items of, as was mentioned in a previous call, like the transition process and support for emeritus projects, standards working group work, infrastructure, project progression, including onboarding and offboarding. And then I believe Michael raised the thought of blue sky thinking as another good agenda item. So I've proposed this. The folks that are putting things together seemed amenable to it. I believe there's a call immediately after this call. I'm hoping to join and get clarity on how things are shaping up there. Yeah, I was trying to coordinate a few things here to maximize our engagement with the community at the events. So if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about it further, we can, or you can ping me later. Or, you know, or we can just move on. Up to you all. I'm hoping that that's, you know, a useful session at the Collab Summit if folks are there, and I hope it doesn't collide with other useful sessions, although I'm sure it will. There's
Yeah, it's always hard.
useful sessions happening. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, like I said, ping me if you want to talk about it more, or if anybody has anything you want to talk about, just speak up now, or I'm going to move along. The next item on the agenda is the ComCom charter update, which, as we discussed earlier, I believe the only thing remaining is to just have the board kind of give a, I don't know if it's necessarily a thumbs up per se, but we just want to make sure that they're aware of this change. All future changes to charters are not board approval required. Continuing, the next one is move the COC to stage 3. I believe that we're waiting on some the previous PR that we discussed, and yeah, the last comment here 6 days ago is blocking on 407. So I don't know if there's anything to discuss here.
I think we've already covered it in the earlier discussion.
Great. Moving on, issue 331. And it looks like we have about 5 minutes before we go into a private session. This is this issue Miles opened a while ago around administering project applications. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm checking my last, okay, so Jory has a comment from a week ago. Do you, yeah, I think that we were just leaving this open until we got the private repo open and having, you know, have that set up and kind of have a process in place for administering project applications. As you said, Jory, I think this issue can be closed. I would agree. Does anybody object? Great, I'm closing it. Excellent. Responsible security disclosures. I wasn't in last week's meeting. Is there, I guess the last comment is from Michael from 14 days ago. Michael, do you have any update here?
I haven't had a chance to look, and so I have no update. I think we're just waiting on work in the package maintenance team first, and then once that completes, we'll loop back.
Okay, and to be clear, we'll wait for them, and then CPC will raise it with CPC members to go and take a look.
Yeah, the idea was that the package maintenance team was working on like a recommended best practice for that we would recommend to community modules as a whole. And then we would use that as a basis for what we would recommend in like for projects that are part of the OpenJS Foundation, because it may be, we can be a little bit more specific.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so great, thank you. I'm going to skip over the post-bootstrap project board review and get into the OpenJS Foundation project onboarding agenda items. We only have 4 minutes, so let's duck into these and see what we can get done.
The other thing too,
the first one.
Sorry, Joe, there's 2 more issues which are below that that were from the
Oh,
project onboarding.
right?
So I don't know if you want to skip to those instead.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No worries, no worries. So the first one there in project onboarding issue number 31 is communication channel between CPC and AMP infra working group. Does anyone have context here that they want to share? I'm just scrolling through comments.
Yes, I can share. We chatted about this briefly last week as well. So if you'll all recall from our application review during the silent period, we wanted to see a plan, a documented plan for decoupling the AMP cache from Google as part of their incubation process. That is going to be a pretty good chunk of work for the AMP team to take on, but they're very keen to do it. They do need to know who should be who from the CPC should be involved in that conversation from the get-go, so that they're creating a plan that's going to be, acceptable to the CPC. So that is what this issue is at the heart of this issue. We want to figure out what the best way to have those conversations would be, and we were keen to hear from lots of folks like Michael and Tierney and Chris and others who were away last week, so we didn't get any further than that.
Okay, it seems like Brian's spinning up a mailing list that people can request to join.
So not quite. The idea was that we needed to talk to people who wanted to be involved in that effort to find out what's the best way to develop, to communicate with each other. So we know who the AMP team is that's going to be dealing with this particular problem. We don't know who the CPC team is. So first we need those hands, and then second we need to figure out what the best channel is for those hands. We can have a private Slack, we can have an email, we can have a repository, we can have it all, but what works is the question. And who?
Okay.
I mean, if you're looking for hands, I'll definitely raise my hand.
Great. Okay, so Chris, and then Tierney, you were another name that we thought would be, oh, Tierney's dropped. Dang, okay. And then also Michael, I thought you might be interested in this conversation as well. But.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the AMP cache, so I'm not sure like I'm the right person to start off and like try to figure, in terms of trying to figure out the solution, I'm not sure I'm the right person, but.
Yeah, and I'm curious, but I'd hesitate to raise my hand because of a full plate. But I wonder how much of this can be done publicly so that folks who are curious can kind of follow along and see how they could help or be involved in to whatever capacity.
So putting on my advocate for the incubating project hat here, I think that's very well and good, but I would be wanting to know, if I were them, like what this process is really going to look like, and who approves that, right? And so the issue is they can go off and they can come up with a plan and then say, here you go, here's our plan, but without conversation and input from CPC members on a somewhat consistent basis, they could get to the end of that and then hear, oh, well, sorry, this doesn't quite work for us. So, to be, collaborative and to be sort of the partners that we want to be here, it would be great to have some names and to be more active if we're going to make this a requirement for them to join.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Is this a plan that they are trying to develop in a certain time period? And the quest is to just collaborate on the plan. Is that accurate?
That's right. So they want to collaborate with us on the plan so that when we are concluded with that plan, we know that it is acceptable. And timeline-wise, they had originally hoped that they could be through the incubation period before the end of the year, but we've realized that that's not going to happen for a variety of reasons. So if we could get it done in early 2020, that would be great.
Okay, and part of the reason why I was asking is the second agenda item here is checklist deadline for Collab Summit graduation. The goal was for AMP to graduate by the OpenJS Collaborators Summit. Is that different than what you were just saying, or?
Yes. So in our conversations with, there's a working group that's myself and Brian Warner are meeting. We've been meeting weekly with stakeholders on the AMP team to talk about their the incubation items, checklist items. They had that as a goal, but have kind of stepped back from that because of holidays and lots of other open questions that we don't have answers to yet, realizing that's probably not realistic. So that's changing.
Okay. All right. Well, we should jump into a private session, but is there any thing that we can? I don't want to leave this hanging. Is there anything that we should be doing for either of these issues before we move on?
I think we could probably, maybe I'll send an email or something out to the projects list asking for volunteers on to participate in the CPC on the info stuff. I did send that last week, but maybe didn't highlight it well enough. I'll talk with Chris as well, who's raised their hand, and we can kind of try and at least get some people involved and participating in that conversation. I'll talk to Tierney. So that's one thing. And then on the Collab Summit deadline thing, that may be just, we can table that.
Okay. Yeah, and if I'm interested in helping, so I'll read that email and see if I can help there as well. Great. Okay, so we should jump into private session. We've gone a little bit over what we expected. So I'll ask if anyone's not a member to drop off, unless you're also a foundation person. I think that would be fine. And I don't know if anyone here is not a member looking at the list.
Okay, let me close the recording. I just realized that that would be a good thing.
Thank